The door was not locked. I did not knock twice. One knock, silence. I turned the handle. What I saw on the other side of that door, in my husband's office, on my husband's chair, in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon, I have never said out loud to anyone. Not my mother, who held me on her kitchen floor that night. Not my sister, who drove across Lagos at midnight when I finally called. Not the counselor, who kept asking me to describe the moment while I sat across from her staring at the wall, saying, I cannot, do not ask me again. I am going to say it today. Because I have been carrying it for 2 years like something lodged in my throat that will not move, and I am tired of carrying it. The flask was still in my hand when I turned back to the corridor. His favorite food, still warm, wrapped in a blue cloth so it would stay hot on the drive. I had been smiling when I left the house. I want you to hold that. A woman in a burgundy dress carrying her husband's favorite food across Lagos on a Tuesday afternoon. Smiling, singing in the car, still completely, foolishly, wholeheartedly in love. Hold her. Because she never came home. The woman who walked back to that elevator, the woman who drove home, who fed her daughter, who set the table and reheated the soup, and sat across from her husband while he ate, that woman was someone else entirely. Someone who knew. Someone who had decided. Someone her husband had made, without realizing it, into the most dangerous thing a betrayed woman can become. Patient. Tell me in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is. Because what I did in the 3 weeks after that Tuesday, that is the story. And I need you with me for all of it. That Tuesday began the way 11 years of Tuesdays had begun. He woke at 6. I was already up. I am always up before him. Have been since the first year when I realized that the 30 minutes before he wakes are the only 30 minutes that belong entirely to me. I made his tea. 3 spoons of sugar. Too sweet, I always told him, and he always said that dying slowly with sweet tea was not the worst way to go. One of our small private jokes. The kind that only exists between 2 people who have spent enough years together to build their own language. He drank his tea. He showered. He came out in the grey suit, the one I had collected from the dry cleaner the week before, the one that made him look more authoritative than he probably felt. He kissed me at the door. Not a real kiss, the kind that has become a gesture after 11 years. Present, but not felt. The way certain words stop meaning anything after you have said them too many times. I noticed that. I had been noticing it for months, filing it quietly in that drawer at the back of every wife's mind where the small unexplained things go to wait. He said he had a big presentation, might be home late. I said fine, drive safe. I watched his car leave the compound. Then I went back inside and I started cooking. The egusi came together the way it does on good days. The oil the right color, the pepper balanced, the smell filling the flat with the warmth of a home that still, on the surface, appeared to be working. I tasted it at noon and I thought of his face. The face he makes when the egusi is right. Eyes closing for a second, that small sound, then, you did it again. He always said that. You did it again, as if after 11 years I might someday get it wrong, and he was genuinely relieved each time I did not. I packed the flask. I wrapped it in the blue cloth. I put on the burgundy dress, the one he always said was his favorite, the one that made me feel like the woman he married rather than the woman who had slowly, quietly become mostly invisible inside her own life. I was singing in the car, one of those old songs that comes from nowhere on a good afternoon. I was singing when I parked. I was smiling when I walked in. The receptionist at the ground floor desk was a young man named Taiwo. I had known Taiwo for 6 years. He had been at that desk before Emeka's last promotion. He always called me Auntie Feola. He always asked after my daughter by name. He had the particular warmth of someone who genuinely likes the people he sees. Not performed hospitality, real human warmth. I walked in carrying the flask, and I was already smiling because I was imagining Emeka's face, and I said, "Good afternoon, Taiwo." He looked up, and something happened behind his eyes. Something small, something that lasted less than a second. The specific look of a person who has just been confronted with a situation they were hoping would not arise. I saw it. I filed it. I did not yet understand it. He said, "Auntie Feola, good afternoon, ma. I came to see Oga. I cooked for him." He looked down at his desk. "Oga is not on his floor, ma. He called this morning, off-site meeting. He has not come in today." I stood still. "His car is in the car park. I drove past it just now. It is in his usual space." Taiwo said nothing. He looked at his desk with the focused attention of a man who has decided that his desk is the most important thing in the room. And in that silence, 3 seconds of a young man refusing to meet my eyes, I felt it, the first tremor. Not suspicion yet, not the sharp cold thing that was coming, just the ground I had been standing on for 11 years, moving slightly beneath me. I smiled. I said, "Let me just go up and check." Taiwo opened his mouth, closed it, nodded once, and I walked to the elevator with my flask and my burgundy dress and my smile that was just starting to cost me something to maintain. If you have ever smiled through something your body already knew, press the like button, because my body already understood. Standing at that reception desk, my body had already understood what my mind was still refusing to process. I pressed 5 in the elevator, his floor. The doors opened. His office at the end of the corridor. Door closed. I knocked. Nothing. I turned the handle. Locked. I stood there. His car was in the car park. His office was locked. He was not on his floor. I pressed the elevator button again. I do not know why I pressed 6. To this day, I cannot explain it. Instinct. Something Taiwo's face had communicated without words. The particular stubbornness of a woman who has driven across Lagos with warm food and is not ready to leave without an answer. I pressed 6. The 6th floor was quieter than 5. A boardroom, 2 meeting rooms, a small lounge for senior staff. No receptionist, no assistant, just a corridor and 4 closed doors and the silence of a floor that was not supposed to be in use. I stood in the elevator doorway. I listened. From behind the 2nd door, the larger meeting room, I heard it. Music, low, deliberate. The specific choice of a person who wants ambience, who is not expecting to be disturbed. Something happened in my chest in that moment. Not pain, not yet. Something colder than pain. The sensation of a body preparing itself for impact before the impact arrives. I walked to the 2nd door. I raised my hand. 1 knock. Silence. I turned the handle. The room was dim, blinds half drawn against the afternoon sun, the long boardroom table pushed to one side, chairs stacked against the wall, and on the leather sofa in the corner, my husband, and a woman I had never seen in my life. She was younger than me, late 20s, a dress that had been partially removed, her head resting on his chest, his arm around her, not tensely, not guiltily, comfortably, the arm of a man completely at home in this room, completely at ease in this room, completely settled into a life I was not supposed to know existed. He heard the door. He turned his head. Our eyes met. And I want to tell you that what I felt in that moment was rage, but that would not be honest. What I felt was grief. Sudden, total, the specific grief of a woman who has just understood that something she believed in with her whole chest, something she gave 11 years to, something she sang about in the car that same afternoon, was never fully what she thought it was. And then, before the grief had even finished arriving, I watched his face change. I watched him look at me and calculate. Not cry, not reach for me, not say her name, calculate. That calculation, that 2-second look, that was the thing that finished it. Not the woman beside him, not the music still playing in the background of my ruined afternoon. That calculation. The fact that in the first second of being caught, the very first second, my husband did not think of me. He thought of himself. I was still holding the flask. The soup was still warm. I turned around, I walked back to the elevator, I pressed ground floor, I stood with my back against the elevator wall and looked at the ceiling and breathed. In, out, in, out. The doors opened. I walked past Taiwo. He said nothing. I said nothing. I got in my car. I placed the flask on the passenger seat. I looked at the building in front of me.
And I said to myself, quietly, in a voice I had never used before, but recognized immediately as the truest voice I had, not here. Not today. Not like this. Go home. Feed your daughter. Think clearly, and then decide exactly what this man's betrayal is going to cost him. Because a woman who breaks in a car park gives a man time to prepare. And I was not going to give him a single second. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had to hold yourself together in public when everything inside you was collapsing? Because that drive home was the longest 20 minutes of my life, and I made it without making a single sound. I went home. I fed my daughter Chidera. I sat beside her while she did her homework, fractions, the kind that frustrated her, the kind where she pressed her pencil too hard when she got an answer wrong. I walked her through each one. When she finally got a full row correct, she looked up at me with that face, exhausted, proud, completely unaware that her mother's world had just ended 3 hours ago, and said, "Mama, did you see?" I said I saw. I kissed her forehead, and I went back to the kitchen and I reheated the egusi soup, and I set the table and I waited. At 8 o'clock, my husband came home. He walked in and kissed my cheek and said something about traffic, the Lagos traffic that is always there, always reliable, always available as an explanation for a man who needs one. He sat down. He looked at the food. Something moved across his face, quickly, almost invisible. He was looking at the soup, the same soup I had brought to his building 3 hours earlier, the same flask, the same blue cloth still on the counter. He knew I had come. He did not know what I had seen. He picked up his spoon. He ate. He said, "The soup is perfect." I watched him eat every spoonful. I watched him eat and I smiled when he spoke, and I answered his questions, and I laughed at the right moments, and I went to bed beside him that night, and I lay in the dark and I listened to him breathe, and I thought, I know who you are now. You do not know that I know, and I am going to use that. That night I made a decision. I was not going to confront him yet. Not until I had everything. Not until I knew her name, how long it had been going on, who in our circle knew, what he had told her about me, what he had promised her, or whether she was also a woman who had been lied to. I needed every piece before I moved. So for 3 weeks, I smiled. For 3 weeks, I cooked his meals and ironed his shirts and sat beside him in church on Sundays and asked about his day. For 3 weeks, I was the perfect wife. And in those 3 weeks, I took the second phone from his glove compartment and read 13 months of messages and looked at every photograph and memorized every name and put it back exactly where I found it. I found out her name was Adaeze, 28 years old, PR firm 2 floors above his company. They had met 14 months ago at a building management meeting. She had approached him. He had not resisted. I found out that in the first months of their relationship, the months when I had thought Emeka seemed newly attentive, newly present, almost like the man I married, he had been managing his guilt by being a better husband at home. He had been compensating for her with me, using my love to manage his conscience. I found out who in our circle knew. 2 people. A couple we had eaten dinner with, whose children had played with Chidera, who had looked me in the eyes across a dinner table and said nothing. I found out everything. And then I made 3 calls. The first was to my lawyer. The second was to my mother, who said nothing for a long time and then said, "What do you need from me?" And I told her, and she said, "Done." The third call was the one that surprised everyone who heard about it afterwards. I called his mother, the woman whose recipe I had spent 11 years perfecting. I called her and I told her exactly what her son had done, and I did not soften a single word of it. She was silent for a long time. Then she said, "Ifeoma, I am sorry." Not, "Are you sure?" Not, "Let us handle this as a family." Not, "Think about Chidera." Just, "I am sorry." And in those 3 words from his own mother, I felt something shift slightly in my chest. Not healing, too early for healing, but the particular relief of a woman being believed without having to beg for it. I chose a Sunday, because Sundays meant Chidera was at my mother's house, and the compound was ours alone, and there was nowhere for him to retreat to, and nothing for him to hide behind. I put his second phone in the kitchen table. I sat across from him. He came in looking for breakfast, and he stopped when he saw it, and something left his face entirely. Not color. Men like him do not lose color. Something else. The particular quality of a man whose last exit has just been closed. He sat down slowly. He looked at the phone. He looked at me. I said nothing. I had learned in 3 weeks of silence that the most powerful thing I could do was wait, that a man building a lie needs a gap to fill, and I was not going to give him one. He said, "How long did you know?" I said 3 weeks. He closed his eyes. 3 weeks. His hands went flat on the table. "You cooked for me. For 3 weeks you cooked for me." I said, "I cooked for Chidera. You happened to eat it." He flinched. "Good. I need you to tell me everything," I said. "Not the version you rehearsed, not what you think I already know. Everything. How it started, how long, what she told her about me, who knew, and you are going to tell me now, in this kitchen, before I walk out of this house and let my lawyer speak for me." And he told me. 2 hours. Some of it I already knew. Some of it I had not found, and some of it, the things he had said to her about me, the way he had described our marriage to create space for what he was doing, some of that I wish I had not asked for. But I had asked, and now I knew. And knowing, even the parts that carved new wounds, was better than living inside a lie I was too comfortable to question. When he finished talking, the kitchen was very quiet. He looked at me with the face of a man hoping that confession might lead somewhere, that 2 hours of honesty might function as a door back in. I looked at him, and I thought about the woman in the burgundy dress who had been singing in the car 3 weeks ago. The woman who had wrapped a flask in a blue cloth because she wanted her husband to see her face when she walked through his door. The woman who just wanted his face, just the face of a man happy to see his wife. I thought about her, and I thought about what she deserved. Tell me in the comments, did he deserve a second chance? Because what I decided that Sunday divided every person I told into 2 camps, and I need to know which camp you are in. I did not leave immediately. I know that's not what some of you want to hear. I know some of you are already typing. I see you. But I have a daughter who did not choose any of this, and I had 11 years that were not all a lie. Some of it was real. Some of it was genuinely ours, and I was not willing to make the most permanent decision of my life from the hottest place of my pain. I gave Emeka one condition. One. Adayeze ends completely. No contact, no explanation offered to her. She simply stops existing in his life from that day. And he ends it himself. Not through a message, not through a letter, a phone call in front of me so I hear his voice say the words. He agreed. He made the call. I sat at the kitchen table and I listened to my husband tell another woman it was over, while I looked at the window and felt nothing that I had expected to feel and everything I had not. As for the 2 people in our circle who knew, the couple who had sat across from me at dinner and looked me in my eyes and said nothing, I did not confront them. I did not argue with them. I simply stopped. Deleted, removed, the particular silent devastation of a woman who has decided that some betrayals do not deserve the dignity of a goodbye. They have reached out since, both of them. Messages I have not answered, explanations I have not read. Some doors, once you close them, are not for reopening. As for my marriage, we are still in the same house. We are in counseling. Some weeks are better than others. Some nights I lie beside him and feel the distance between us like a physical thing, something installed where warmth used to be. Whether we survive it, I do not know. I am not going to stand here and tell you love conquers everything. I am not going to give you a clean ending because I do not have one yet. What I will tell you is this. The woman who parked in that car park and held herself together by force and drove home in silence and set the table and watched her husband eat, she was not weak. She was not a fool. She was a woman who understood that the most powerful move available to her in that moment was stillness. And stillness is not nothing. Stillness is a choice. Stillness is a woman deciding that she will not be rushed into a reaction that serves his timeline instead of hers. I brought him his favorite food that afternoon. He did not deserve a single spoonful. But I deserved my own table. I deserved my own house. I deserved my daughter's face at breakfast every morning. And I was not going to let his choices take those things from me without a fight. The flask is still in my kitchen. I use it sometimes. I never wrap it in the blue cloth anymore. But I still cook the egusi the way his mother taught me. Not for him, for me. Because I earned that recipe, and it was always mine.
If this story reached something inside you, press the like button for every woman who held herself together when she had every right to fall apart. Subscribe to Femmz Stories because real stories do not have clean endings and the women inside them are never just victims. Tell me in the comments, would you have stayed or left?
And what would you have done with that flask? I read every single comment.